I wouldn't either.
People eat scorpion lollipops. What's wrong with you?
I don't even know. One time, I'm so afraid of bugs. One time when I was in 6th grade, I had gone out to feed my dogs and I was wearing jeans. And when I came back in, I like felt something in my pants leg, and I knew it was something. So I grabbed it, and which killed it. There was bug guts everywhere. But I was in hysterics, like tearing off my pants and like trying not to let go of it. It was a grasshopper.
I was in elementary school. There was as they looked down, there's literally a wasp on your leg.
Oh no!
Down, it was like a huge hornet on
Miss McClellan.
Yes, sir.
The streak of getting on time could only last one day. I was late again. Speaking of bugs, I had a cockroach, right?
Yeah.
In my room. I hit it 5 times with a towel and then twice with a shoe. It was still moving.
They will not die.
No, it doesn't make sense.
Close the door, guys. I feel like everybody is, yeah, do close it. I feel like everybody's very like high energy today, which is fine. You're here.
I don't know how I am. I'm closing 4 days this week.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I'm going at 7 a.m. on Saturday.
Ugh, that's terrible. Oh, everybody's here. That's great news. Okay. So before we're going to start reading chapter 5, but I wanted to just like talk
it's 11 o'clock.
Thank you. About grades a little bit, not about how you're doing, but about what's coming up for the rest of the year. And this is gonna stand unless I make some massive changes to our schedule, and I don't plan to. The only reason I would is if testing gets in the way, like if I have to be out to proctor a test one day, and I'm hoping that does not happen. I hate proctoring tests. It's so boring. You can't do anything. You're not allowed to read. You're not allowed to write. You're not allowed to do anything. You have to actively monitor. It's terrible. Yeah. Teachers hate tests just as much as you guys do, I promise, from a multitude of reasons. You don't have any this year, do you?
I do, in probably stats and economics.
Oh, okay. But it's not like it's just the teachers are giving them, right? Yeah. One thing I was going to point out, I put the wrong due date on something.
Miss McClellan, you almost gave me a heart attack.
Is paying me attention, and we should. What, James?
You almost gave me a heart attack.
Why?
Because I went on power school and saw like 9 grades without a grade. I was like, what did I miss?
No, you didn't miss anything. I just went ahead and put in everything for the rest of the year.
What? I didn't do that, man. I ain't have my charger. My Mac was dead.
What are you talking about?
I couldn't do anything.
Okay. Well, don't worry about it. Don't stress out.
Yeah, stress out.
What I was gonna say is that I put the wrong date on the thing that y'all are supposed to do yesterday. The second part of the Harlem Renaissance thing, and I had just done it a week early. So I said it was due May 11th. It's not, it's due today. And I went back and fixed that today. The thing that James is talking about that freaked him out is that I went into Power School and I just put spots for all of the assignments for the rest of the year. So that stressed James out because he was like, oh no, I'm missing like 9 things, and he's not, and none of you are. Also, the dates on them might be a little bit different just because we can't put in any dates past June 11th, but we're in school for a whole week after that. So it doesn't make much sense. But I wanted to talk to you about this because this is particularly important for those of you who have low grades right now, but it is important for everyone. You listening?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We will have how many? More than I thought. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 daily grades from here to the end of the quarter. And in fact, you've already done one of them, or you should have already done one of them, the one from yesterday. We will have a test on the Great Gatsby. We'll have a final project, And for those of you whose grades are quite low, there will be an extra credit project that you can do. And I will give that out probably first week of June.
Did you put it on my test?
Let me see. Yes, I did. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of let you guys know, because we've had a lot of daily grades this quarter. We've had one quiz grade, but we have not yet had a test grade or a project grade. And that test and project grade is what's really going to affect your score, your overall average. So if you have a low average, I would highly recommend, studying a lot for the test, which we're not there yet. We haven't finished the book, but just going ahead and letting you know that. And doing a really good job on the final project, because those are more heavily weighted than any of your other grades from this quarter. So it could really help you improve your grade. And I would also recommend doing the extra credit, obviously. Anything else I wanted to mention before we start reading? I don't think so. Yeah, so I know like that's kind of well in advance, but I just kind of wanted to let y'all know where we're headed and kind of like which basket to put all your eggs in if you are someone who is struggling, which is several of you. Not everybody. In fact, some people are doing great. Alyssa. But I haven't really looked at y'all's yearly grades. I'm going to take a quick peek and see if anybody's in danger of failing. The answer is yes. I'm not laughing at you failing. I'm just laughing at the fact that failed. No. Yeah. I don't even know like what the point of that is. Yeah. Well, they shouldn't, like legally they shouldn't say out loud who's failing, but you're not actually allowed to share other people's grades. However, I think there's nothing wrong with saying you're doing really well in this class, and it's fine if everybody knows that. Yeah, there's a few people who really need to pull it out of the bag this last quarter, just because you're on a dangerous bubble. We're even not on the bubble. Okay, let me plug this in. Oh, and look at today's insult. Ooh, you are a foolish, extravagant spirit, a fool of forms, figures, shapes, objects, ideas, apprehensions, motions, revolutions. Wow. Still a lot. What? Oh, God, I'm so sorry. Whew. Thanks for pointing that out, Randall. Ooh. I think so. Yeah, I'm pretty confident you are. But you know, I'm very sorry if you now know who isn't. Yes. I'm passing my classes for the year. That's wonderful. I hope so. You got to graduate. This was yesterday's. I have a humor to knock you indifferently well, and I think I'm going to put that one on the board. It basically means I want to smack some sense into you. Have a humor to knock you.
Wait, was that from yesterday? Was that from yesterday? What? Yes. Wow, it's not sense. That's a really good example.
Can't wait to kind of like once this year is over, look back at what the best ones were. Maybe we'll vote. I don't understand how some people always these, especially during COVID. Like there's still some people that just act like COVID didn't face them. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Some people are doing better since COVID, which surprises. I don't really get that, but that's awesome. Just to call out somebody else who does a good job. LeBron's been killing it this year. Like LeBron, you should be really proud, and everybody is really proud of you. Like, what does that mean?
Wait, what you said?
That was weird. Well, Alyssa was saying that she doesn't know how some people still have A's and B's, especially with COVID. Like COVID didn't affect them, and I said, some people have actually done really well in spite of COVID. And I pointed you out, like you've been crushing it this year. And, you know, particularly in light of how weird this year has been, that's awesome. And you should be really proud. Your teachers are.
What's the person in the background?
Oh, well, I said you've been killing it this year, and Randall said LeBron's always killing something, which made me suspicious. What does that mean?
Hey, let's see. I killed a lot of food. Man, I still want to die from that.
I'm always killing something, always murdering. You know how it goes.
Don't blame me. I'm doing good work. I'm bored. Plus, I have a mom that's strict on my butt every time I have like a bad grade. She tells me like, LeBron, fix this. I'm like, okay.
I'm gonna turn this screen up.
Don't blame me. Don't thank me. Thank my mother.
Well, I do thank your mother, but I don't talk to your mother very often. Has she just been like making you do stuff?
Don't you tell LeBron you haven't feeling great. You gotta go back to school. Nope. I like being at my home. I like relaxing. I like to just sit at my home and just read.
Yeah.
I'm catching up all the Spawn comic I'm trying to finish up.
Well, it's working for you. It's been so weird how this year has been, because you have, you know, people like you who are kind of thriving at home, being on their own schedule more or less and taking care of their own time. And then there are some people who, when they're at home, they do terrible. And once they come back in, they manage to get stuff done. People just are wired really differently. All right, so we're going to start chapter 5, Cinco, of The Great Gatsby. Let me do this thing. Where's that thing? That's what I want. Chapter 5. So last chapter was weird, and hopefully y'all all finished reading it by now. But the way it ended was weird. The whole thing was weird because Nick and Gatsby went on like a ride together, and Gatsby told him all this stuff about himself, but it didn't really seem to ring true. Stuff about how he was in the war, and like he had his war medal and this picture of himself and a bunch of people at Oxford. Like he felt the need to prove that he was telling the truth. And Nick did believe him by the end. Oh shoot, I think you guys actually have one more grade and I had forgotten about it. I just gotta write myself a note. I had those Gatsby questions. Did I put that in Power School? Oh, go away, Hamilton. I don't want you. I can't look at this right now because it will show everybody all of your grades, and I can't do that. So Gatsby said, Jordan is gonna have dinner with you tonight and ask you to do me a big favor. And Nick was kind of annoyed about it because, like, why can't you just tell me now? Why do we have to go through this whole song and dance of me inviting Jordan out and then her coming and her telling me? But Gatsby was like, no, she has to tell you. So he did go out with Jordan, and basically, long story short, Gatsby and Daisy had been in love 5 years before the events of this story. This was obviously well before she met and married Tom. It was when Gatsby was in the war, and she was like the most popular, most beautiful girl in whatever town it is that she's from in Alabama. And he fell in love with her. Then he went off to war. And when he came back, she was married to Tom. And, you know, there was that thing about like right before her wedding, she got drunk and she had like gotten a letter. And now I think we can kind of put it together that the letter was from Gatsby and we're not sure what it said, but she almost didn't marry Tom because of it. So it's pretty clear that Daisy and Gatsby had like a real thing back in the day. But what Gatsby wants is for Nick, who lives next door to him, to invite Daisy to tea. And he's going to come over. So Nick is thinking about it, and we're going to find out in this chapter what happens. We could potentially get through this chapter if we move quickly. If we don't get through it, I've already uploaded on Canvas chapter 5 audio. It's just me reading it, but the whole thing is only 25 minutes. So I know that if we read fast, we could get through it, which would be great. Okay, let me share my screen with you folks. I'm gonna get rid of that, and start chapter 5. Oh yeah, and she says, don't tell Daisy that we're meeting Gatsby, or that like Gatsby wants to come meet her. Just invite her to tea. Don't tell her about the situation. So we'll see how that goes. Anybody want to read chapter 5? Are you gonna read it? You can if you want. You might want to get closer though, just because like nobody will be able to hear you. And whenever you get tired, I'll take over. Okay.
When I came home to West Egg that night, I was afraid for a moment that my house was on fire. 2 o'clock in the whole corner of Peninsula.
Yeah, Peninsula.
Peninsula was blazing with light, which felt unreal on the shrubbery. And made thin
elongating
lengths upon the roadside wires. Turning a corner, I saw that it was Gatsby's house, lit from tower to cellar. At first, I thought it was another part, a wild route that had resolved itself into high Engl III or sardines in the province, with all the house door open to the wind, but there wasn't a sound, only wind by in the tree, which blew the wires, and made the lights go off and on, as if the house had blinked. As my taxi drove, I saw Gatsby across the wall. Their place of life was straight. I said, does it? He turned his eyes towards. I had fancy. Let's go to
Coney Island.
Coney Island. In my car, too late. Well, suppose we take a plunge into a swing. I haven't made use of it all summer. I've got to go to bed. All right. He waited, looking at me with repressed eagerness. I walked with Miss Baker. I said, after a moment,
Oh, up here.
Oh,
yeah.
Going to call up Daisy tomorrow and invite her over here. Oh, that's all right, he said carelessly. I didn't want to put you in trouble. One day would suit you. What didn't suit you? He corrected me quickly. I don't want to put you in trouble, you see. How about the day after tomorrow? He considered for a moment. Then, with
reluctance.
I want to get the grass cut, he said. We both looked at the grass. There was a sharp line where my baggy lawn ended and the darker, well-kept expanse of his skin. I suspected that he meant my grass. There's another little thing, he said, certainly, and hesitated. Would you rather put it off for a few days? I asked. it isn't about that. At least he fumbled with a series of beginnings. Why I thought, wow, look here, old sport. You don't make much money, do you? Not very much. This seemed to reassure him, and he continued more confidently. I thought you did it. I thought you did it. If you pardon my, you see, I carry on a little business on the side, a sort of sideline, you understand? And I thought that if you don't make very much money, very much, you are selling bonds, aren't you? Old sport, trying to. Well, this would interest you. It wouldn't take much of your time, and you might pick up a nice bit of money. It happens to be a rather confidential sort of thing. I realize now that under different circumstances, that conversation might have been one of crisis from my life, but because the offer was obviously an tactically for a service to be rendered. I had no choice except to cut him off there. I got my hands full. I said, I'm much obligated.
Obliged. It's the same word as obligated, basically.
But I couldn't take on any more money. You wouldn't have to do any business with my rules, which she evidently. He thought that I was shying away from the
connection
mentioned at lunch, but I assured him he was wrong. He waited a moment longer, hoping I would begin a conversation, but I was too absorbed to be responsive. So he went unwillingly.
All right, let's pause. So I think Gatsby's so cute in this scene because he's been waiting up, and it said it was at 2 a.m. He's been waiting up for Nick to get home from his outing with Jordan Baker, and like all the lights in his house are on, and he is just like kind of pacing, but he's so eager to hear what happened and like if Nick is going to agree to ask Daisy to tea. And I mean, it's so silly here at the beginning. He's like, let's go to Coney Island. Let's go take a swim in the swimming pool. And it's like, it's 2 a.m. I got to go to bed. And he's like, okay. But he's just like so nervous to hear what he's going to say. But he's like, I'll do it. Like, that's totally fine. I'll invite her to tea, like whatever day you want. He's like, no, whatever day you want. Like he just is trying to, he's so nervous. And then when Nick agrees to, the first thing he says, and I mean, he says it sort of, well, the word they said was tactlessly. He's like, hey, you don't make much money, do you? Which rude, but you could, like, I have some stuff you could do. And he says it's a confidential sort of thing. If you guys will remember, like when we met Meyer Wolfsheim, who Nick was not impressed with, it definitely seemed like there was some sort of like underhanded dealings going on. Like Meyer Wolfsheim is a gambler, and they said he fixed the 1999 World Series. And also he wears like cufflinks made out of human teeth. What? And that's weird. Yeah. Like, did he murder somebody for those teeth? I don't know. And Gatsby is like mixed up with him somehow. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, there was that moment when they were having lunch with Meyer Wolfsheim where he was like, oh, is this the guy? And Gatsby's like, no, this is not the guy, different guy. Don't worry about it. So there's something going on with Gatsby. Like everything he's doing is not totally above board. And Nick's like, no, I don't want any part of that. Like, it's just a favor and it's no big, like, you're not indebted to me now. I'll invite her over to tea. No big deal. Randall, do you want to keep going? You want to trade off with somebody? Jenny, you want to read?
The even had right there, right?
Yeah.
The even had made me a lightheaded and happy. I think I walked into deep sleep and then into my front door. So I didn't know whether or not Gatsby went to Pony Island or for our main out to see my food. While his house lay guardedly right on, I called up Lady from the office next morning and invited her to come to tea. You're my Tom, I want her what? You're my Tom. Who is Tom? She asked instantly.
Just your husband.
Agreed upon pouring rain at 11 o'clock. A man in a raincoat jacket in Walmart tapped at my front door and said that Mr. Gatsby had sent him over to cut my grass. This reminded me that I had forgotten to tell my friend to come back to Joel into West Egg Village to search for her among solid white wash alley and to buy some cups and lemons and flowers. The flowers were unnecessary for at 2 o'clock at grandpa's arrived from Gatsby with
Innumerable. A lot of receptacles.
An hour later, the front door opened her sleeve and Gatsby in a white flannel suit, silk shirt, and a gold-colored tie. He was pale and there were dark signs of sleeplessness beneath his eyes. Is everything all right? He asked immediately. Grass was fine if that's what you need. Or grass, he
Inquired.
Huh?
Inquired.
Where are you?
Inquired.
Here.
Or the grass in the yard. He looked out the window at it, but judging from this expression, I don't believe this sort of thing. That's very good.
Vaguely.
One of the people said that he thought the rain would stop about 4.
So annoying.
I think it was now. Have you got everything you need have you got everything you need in the shape of tea? I took him into the pantry where he looked a little
Reproachfully.
Together we
Scrutinized.
the 12 of the cakes of the
Delicatessen. I know.
shop. They do, of course, they're from. And he added
Mhm.
The rain cold about 3:30 to seasonal then drops like gassy
Vacant.
copy of play
Economics.
started at the why stuff like that?
From Finland. When they're talking about the Finn, he's saying he mentioned earlier that he has this Finnish woman that like keeps house for him, and he just calls her the Finn sometimes, which is maybe a little racist, but all right.
Texas.
Maybe, yeah, both.
The kitchen for
Bleared.
He was going home. Why is that? Well, it's too late. He looked at his watch at this time elsewhere. I can't do it all day. Don't be silly. It's just 2 minutes before. He sat down literally as if I had special minute.
Simultaneously.
Real with the sun of a water turning into a lane. We both jump up and
Harrowed.
myself. I went out into the yard and
Lilac.
Huh?
Lilac.
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 A large open car was coming up. It's a baby face, so silently baby. Look out and he will be bright.
Ecstatic.
Ecstatic smile.
Let's pause that. So first of all, he's still so nervous, and I love that. This scene is actually so funny in the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, because he's just like beside himself with nerves, and he's like, I'm going home. Nobody's coming to tea. And he's like, it's not even time yet. Like we said 4 o'clock and it's 2 minutes to 4. Calm down. And Gatsby's just like practically tearing his hair out over the whole thing. So Daisy's coming over for tea. She thinks she's coming over to tea with Nick. And she's going to see this man that she was in love with 5 years ago. If y'all had to predict, how do you think she's going to react? Run out of the room. What'd you say, Jenny? What? Did you answer? What? No, I don't. Well, actually, I have some almonds. You want almonds? Yeah, almonds. Yeah, like she might run out of the room. She might shut down. Like it's very awkward. If I was all of a sudden going somewhere and they're like, I thought I was meeting a friend and they're like, oh, here's your ex from 5 years ago. I'd be like, hi, like, what do you do? But they were really in love back in the day. So we'll see. Jenny, do you want to keep going or want me to? You say me? Okay. Is this absolutely where you live, my dearest one? She talks so weird. Like she's so highfalutin. The exhilarating ripple of her voice was a wild tonic in the rain. I had to follow the sound of it for a moment, up and down, with my ear alone before any words came through. A damp streak of hair lay like a dash of blue paint across her cheek, and her hand was wet with glistening drops as I took it to help her from the car. Are you in love with me? She said low in my ear. Or why did I have to come alone? That's the secret of Castle Rack Rent. Tell your chauffeur to go far away and spend an hour. Come back in an hour, Ferdy. Then in a grave murmur, his name is Ferdy. Does the gasoline affect his nose? I don't think so, she said innocently. Why? We went in. To my overwhelming surprise, the living room was deserted. Gatsby's supposed to be in there waiting, and he has disappeared. Well, that's funny, I exclaimed. What's funny? She turned her head as there was a light, dignified knocking at the front door. I went out and opened it. Gatsby, pale as death, with his hands plunged like weights in his coat pockets, was standing in a puddle of water, glaring tragically into my eyes. With his hands still in his coat pockets, he stalked by me into the hall, turned sharply as if he were on a wire, and disappeared into the living room. It wasn't a bit funny. Aware of the loud beating of my own heart, I pulled the door to against the increasing rain. For half a minute, there wasn't a sound. Then from the living room, I heard a sort of choking murmur and part of a laugh, followed by Daisy's voice on a clear, artificial note. I certainly am awfully glad to see you again. A pause. It endured horribly. I had nothing to do in the hall, so I went into the room. Gatsby, his hands still in his pockets, was reclining against the mantelpiece in a strained counterfeit of perfect ease, even of boredom. His head leaned back so far that it rested against the face of a defunct mantelpiece clock, and from this position, his distraught eyes stared down at Daisy, who was sitting frightened but graceful on the edge of a stiff chair. We've met before, muttered Gatsby. His eyes glanced momentarily at me, and his lips parted with an abortive attempt at a laugh. Luckily, the clock took this moment to tilt dangerously at the pressure of his head, whereupon he turned and caught it with trembling fingers and set it back in place. Then he sat down rigidly, his elbow on the arm of the sofa and his chin in his hand. I'm sorry about the clock, he said. My own face had now assumed a deep tropical burn. I couldn't muster up a single commonplace out of the 1,000 in my head. It's an old clock, I told them idiotically. I think we all believed for a moment that it had smashed in pieces on the floor. It's just so awkward. Like, no one knows what to say or like what to do. Gatsby's like leaning against the mantelpiece and nearly knocks this clock off, and they act like it's the end of the world. It's just so awkward. and just like uncomfortable. I think that Nick is maybe the most uncomfortable because this is not even his deal. Like he did this, and now both of them are being so awkward. We haven't met for many years, said Daisy, her voice as matter of fact as it could ever be. 5 years next November. The automatic quality of Gatsby's answer set us all back at least another minute. I had them both on their feet with the desperate suggestion that they help me make tea in the kitchen when the demoniac Finn brought it in on a tray. Amid the welcome confusion of cups and cakes, a certain physical decency established itself. Gatsby got himself into a shadow, and while Daisy and I talked, looked conscientiously from one to the other of us with tense, unhappy eyes. However, as calmness wasn't an end in itself, I made an excuse at the first possible moment and got to my feet. Where are you going? Demanded Gatsby in immediate alarm. I'll be back. I've got to speak to you about something before you go. He followed me wildly into the kitchen, closed the door, and whispered, oh God, in a miserable way. What's the matter? This is a terrible mistake, he said, shaking his head from side to side. A terrible, terrible mistake. You're just embarrassed, that's all. And luckily, I added, Daisy's embarrassed too. She's embarrassed, he repeated incredulously. Just as much as you are. Don't talk so loud. You're acting like a little boy, I broke out impatiently. Not only that, but you're rude. Daisy's sitting in there all alone. He raised his hand to stop my words, looked at me with unforgettable reproach, and opening the door cautiously, went back into the other room. Like he pulls Nick out into the hall, basically. He's like, what do I do? This was such a bad mistake. I don't know what to say to this girl. And he's like, shut up. You're being insane. You're being rude. You're being childish. She feels uncomfortable too. Just get in there and talk to her. This is what the whole point was. You invited her. Yeah, this was your idea in the first place. You gotta make some effort. Like, I know you feel uncomfortable, but just push through it. Make it happen. I walked out the back way, just as Gatsby had when he had made his nervous circuit of the house half an hour before, and ran for a huge black knotted tree whose massed leaves made a fabric against the rain. Once more it was pouring, and my irregular lawn, well shaved by Gatsby's gardener, abounded in small muddy swamps and prehistoric marshes. There was nothing to look at from under the tree except Gatsby's enormous house, so I stared at it, like Kant at his church steeple, for half an hour. A brewer had built it in the early period craze a decade before, and there was a story that he'd agreed to pay 5 years' taxes on all the neighboring cottages if the owners would have their roofs thatched with straw. Perhaps their refusal took the heart out of his plan to found a family. He went into an immediate decline. His children sold his house with the black wreath still on the door. Americans, while occasionally willing to be serfs, have always been obstinate about being peasantry. After half an hour, the sun shone again and the grocer's automobile rounded Gatsby's drive with the raw material for his servant's dinner. I felt sure he wouldn't eat a spoonful. A maid began opening the upper windows of his house, appeared momentarily in each, and leaning from a large central bay, spat meditatively into the garden. It was time I went back. While the rain continued, it had seemed like the murmur of their voices, rising and swelling a little now and then with gusts of emotion. But in the new silence, I felt that silence had fallen within the house too. I went in after making every possible noise in the kitchen, short of pushing over the stove, so that he's not like, in case they're doing God knows what, he's like making noise so they know he's coming in. But I don't believe they heard a sound. They were sitting at either end of the couch, looking at each other as if some question had been asked or was in the air, and every vestige of embarrassment was gone. Daisy's face was smeared with tears, and when I came in, she jumped up and began wiping at it with her handkerchief before a mirror. But there was a change in Gatsby that was simply confounding. He literally glowed. Without a word or a gesture of exultation, a new well-being radiated from him and filled the room. Oh, hello, old sport, he said, as if he hadn't seen me for years. I thought for a moment he was going to shake hands. It stopped raining. Has it? When he realized what I was talking about, that there were twinkle bells of sunshine in the room, he smiled like a weatherman, like an ecstatic patron of recurrent light, and repeated the news to Daisy. What do you think of that? It stopped raining. I'm glad, Jay. Her throat, full of aching, grieving beauty, told only of her unexpected joy. I want you and Daisy to come over to my house, he said. I'd like to show her around. You're sure you want me to come? Absolutely, old sport. Daisy went upstairs to wash her face. Too late, I thought, with humiliation of my towels, while Gatsby and I waited on the lawn. My house looks well, doesn't it? He demanded. See how the whole front of it catches the light. I agreed that it was splendid. Yes, his eyes went over it, every arch door and square tower. It took me just 3 years to earn the money that bought it. I thought you inherited your money. I did, old sport, he said automatically, but I lost most of it in the big panic, the panic of the war. I think he hardly knew what he was saying, for when I asked him what business he was in, he answered, "That's my affair," before he realized that it wasn't the appropriate reply. "Oh, I've been in several things," he corrected himself. "I was in the drug business and then I was in the oil business, but I'm not in either one now." He looked at me with more attention. "Do you mean you've been thinking over what I proposed the other night?" Like, this is also a little bit weird, just to kind of add on to this like mystery about Gatsby and what he does, how he has afforded this gigantic house and his weekly parties that cost God knows how much. He has told Nick all this stuff about himself and about how like he inherited all his money after his family died, but he kind of slips up here and he's like, "Oh, it took me 3 years to earn that money." And Nick was like, "Earn? You told me that you inherited your money." And he quickly like has to make up kind of a lie and is not very good at it, not very good at lying, honestly, because when Nick asks him what he does, he automatically is like, "That's my business," and then realizes, oh, that's not how you answer people who are asking you casual questions, and kind of like makes up a new thing. Also, when it says the drug business, it just means like pharmacy. It doesn't mean like the drug trade, you know. Before I could answer, Daisy came out of the house and 2 rows of brass buttons on her dress gleamed in the sunlight. "That huge place there?" she cried, pointing. "Do you like it?" "I love it, but I don't see how you live there all alone." "I keep it always full of interesting people, night and day, people who do interesting things, celebrated people." Which we know is true, because there was that whole thing that Cece read last time with the names of everybody who comes to these parties, and it's like senators and directors and actors and musicians and just heiresses and everyone else.
It was like reading off the list of the Addams Family in the new Addams Family movie. You know?
Yeah, it is kind of like that. Or it makes me think, if you guys are familiar with the Bible, there are some books that are just literally like, and Matthew begot Matthew the second, or like Jacob begat John and John begat James. It's just like name after name after name. That's what it made me think of. Instead of taking the shortcut along the Sound, we went down the road and entered by the big postern. I don't know what a postern is. With enchanting murmurs, Daisy admired this aspect or that of the feudal silhouette against the sky, admired the gardens, the sparkling odor of jonquils and the frothy odor of hawthorn and plum blossoms, and the pale gold odor of Kiss Me at the Gate. It was strange to reach the marble steps and find no stir of bright dresses in and out the door, and hear no sound but bird voices in the trees. And inside, as we wandered through Marie Antoinette music rooms and restoration salons, I felt that there were guests concealed behind every couch and table, under orders to be breathlessly silent until we had passed through. As Gatsby closed the door of the Merton College Library, I could have sworn I heard the owl-eyed man break into ghostly laughter. I'm really hoping we get to this one part. We went upstairs through period bedrooms swathed in rose and lavender silk and vivid with new flowers, through dressing rooms and pool rooms and bathrooms with sunken baths, intruding into one chamber where a disheveled man in pajamas was doing liver exercises on the floor. It was Mr. Klipspringer, the boarder. I had seen him wandering hungrily about the beach that morning. Finally, we came to Gatsby's own apartment, a bedroom and a bath and an Adams study, where we sat down and drank a glass of some chartreuse he took from a cupboard in the wall. He hadn't once ceased looking at Daisy, and I think he revalued everything in his house according to the measure of response it drew from her well-loved eyes. Sometimes, too, he stared around at his possessions in a dazed way, as though in her actual and astounding presence, none of it was any longer real. Once he nearly toppled down a flight of stairs. So his nerves are gone, but he's still very, like, Gatsby's just beside himself to have her here. Like, he's clearly been pining for her for 5 years, and you know, wants to impress her, wants to show her his big house and like all the stuff he has. And even as he's showing off everything he has, he's kind of like taking stock of it by like, does this impress her or does it not? If it doesn't, he doesn't really care about that thing anymore. His bedroom was the simplest room of all, except where the dresser was garnished with a toilet set of pure dull gold. Daisy took the brush with delight and smoothed her hair. Fudge, we're gonna run out of time. Whereupon Gatsby sat down and shaded his eyes and began to laugh. "It's the funniest thing, old sport," he said hilariously. I can't. When I tried to, he had passed visibly through 2 states and was entering upon a third. After his embarrassment and his unreasoning joy, he was consumed with wonder at her presence. He had been full of the idea so long, dreamed it right through to the end, waited with his teeth set, so to speak, at an inconceivable pitch of intensity. Now, in the reaction, he was running down like an overwound clock. Recovering himself in a minute, he opened for us 2 hulking patent cabinets which held his masked suits and dressing gowns and ties and his shirts piled like bricks and stacks a dozen high. I've got a man in England who buys me clothes. He sends over a selection of things at the beginning of each season, spring and fall. He took out a pile of shirts and began throwing them one by one before us. Shirts of sheer linen and thick silk and fine flannel which lost their folds as they fell and covered the table in many-colored disarray. While we admired, he brought more and the soft, rich heap mounted higher. Shirts with stripes and scrolls and plaids and coral and apple green and lavender and faint orange with monograms of Indian blue. Suddenly, with a strained sound, Daisy bent her head into the shirts and began to cry stormily. "They're such beautiful shirts," she sobbed, her voice muffled in the thick folds. "It makes me sad because I've never seen such beautiful shirts before." Ooh, I want to get to the end of this. After the house, we were to see the grounds and the swimming pool and the hydroplane and the midsummer flowers, but outside Gatsby's window began to rain again, so we stood in a row looking at the corrugated surface of the Sound. "If it wasn't for the mist, we could see your home across the bay," said Gatsby. "You always have a green light that burns all night at the end of your dock." Daisy put her arm through his abruptly, but he seemed absorbed in what he had just said. Possibly it had occurred to him that the colossal significance of that light had now vanished forever. Compared to the great distance that had separated him from Daisy, it had seemed very near to her, almost touching her. It had seemed as close as a star to the moon. Now it was again a green light on the dock. His count of enchanted objects had diminished by 1. I want to talk about that, but we're going to have to talk about it tomorrow because the bell's going to ring in just a second. And y'all will need to finish reading this chapter or listen to me reading it, which I've posted a link to. And we'll talk about that green light thing tomorrow because that's probably the biggest symbol from this. All right, see ya.